Hey guys, it's Rand. This is Arab Wrestlers You Should Know, sponsored by Premier Pro Wrestling. It's going to be brought to you without any commercials. And today we're going to talk about the late, legitimately great Skandor Akbar. Skandor Akbar was such an amazing heel, and that David Bowie funk slash stardusty type of music fame was at one point Skandor Akbar as a manager's entrance music, and I can't tell you how effing cool it was when I was a kid watching Skandor Akbar on one of the first syndicated pro wrestling television shows, World Class Championship from Dallas, being brought to us from the Sportatorium, and actually being in said Sportatorium booked to wrestle, and to see Akbar come out to that music was the coolest thing ever. Anyhow, Skandor Akbar translates into Alexander the Great. I never knew that, and now I'm glad that I do. And aside from that, I'm learning something new about an old friend, Ak, as we used to call him. Akbar led the villainous stable Devastation Incorporated in Bill Watts' Universal Wrestling Federation during the promotion's heyday in the 1980s, as well as other regional territories, including World Class Championship Wrestling and the Global Wrestling Federation, which, to be honest with you, I don't even think bears mentioning. I can't pronounce his real name, and to me, it's not that important because I knew him as Ak. He was my friend. He was born in 1934, September 29th, in Wichita Falls, Texas, and grew up in Vernon, Texas. His father was from Lebanon, and his mother, Mary, had Arab roots, though she, too, was American-born in Texas. He had two older sisters, and it's funny for me to realize that Ak was the baby of the family. He was the youngest child. Started wrestling in 1963, and at the suggestion of Fritz von Erich in 1966, in order to sound more Arabic, Akbar teamed with Danny Hodge, which I never knew, and eventually turned on him, starting a feud. Akbar joined the WWF for a brief run in the late 70s, and he was managed by Classy Freddie Blassie, which I never knew. Akbar also worked as a babyface in Australian World Championship Wrestling territory for a season in the mid-70s, feuding mainly with the great Mephisto. That's something else. Now here, this again is coming from Wiki, so there's some truth to it. But it says that Ak retired from active wrestling in 1977. And I'm not going to say that. I don't think that he did, because they would always take a new guy, like, for example, Chris Von Erich, okay? The youngest of the Von Erichs, and they did some building up, and he was supposed to have his first actual match at the Sportatorium, my first night in, with Chris Von Erich. So if you see what I'm saying, he would always end up wrestling just like Bobby Heenan did before Bobby Heenan had that horrible, horrible neck injury. And I can remember that, coming into the Dallas Sportatorium as a 20-something-year-old kid, really pie-eyed and so excited to be there, but you couldn't oversell that because then they would brand you a mark from the get-go, so I had to be cool even though I was getting ready to burst inside. However, sadly, my first night in, they had really publicized, and people actually came to World Class to the Sportatorium to see the match between Chris Von Erich and Ak. And Chris wasn't there. Right around bell time, Chris was seen in the parking lot in nothing but his socks. Apparently a couple of groupies had rolled him and dumped him off at the Sportatorium, and he was too effed up to wrestle Ak. And I can't remember what they did, but I do remember that nobody left, and Ak did wrestle with somebody. I wish I could remember who. And thank God was able to cover that. Can you imagine that? going through all that with the promotion, finally drawing a decent house, and then that happening. And God bless Chris's soul. I'm not burying Chris by any stretch of the imagination because it's a disease, folks, and I suffer from the disease as well. However, today I'm not suffering, only by the grace of God. Now, let's go back to Ak. And there's just so much that this guy's accomplished. And one of the things I heard about Skandor Akbar when I was down there, in the sportatorium was, kid, Akbar and Bronco Lubitsch have forgotten more about wrestling than we will ever know, and I knew that just being in there for a month and watching Akbar and working with Bronco Lubitsch in the ring. One thing I can say too, or another thing I can say, and probably the most important thing I can say, is how loved General Akbar was. Ak was just so loved, and I even know that, for example, Steve Austin puts him over all the time on the Broken Skull podcast, and that's another one that was there at the time. He was 6 months in the industry and just starting to wrestle, when I was at the Sportatorium with Akbar. And one of Ak's, best friends was the late, great Paul Bear Percival Pringle, who was also at the Sportatorium back then when I broke in. And Ak and Percy treated me in such a great way. They treated me with such respect because I was actually down there as a baby face, and that was the best baby face I ever was. And we were actually starting to sell tickets with me. And I was so humble about it and not a punk. And that's what was down there, was either really cocky people at the time or people that had passed their prime that just would go out there and phone it in. And, I was excited, I was young, I was hungry, and they capitalized off that to draw in some old fans and new fans when I was there. And I think Akbar and Percy were the ones that really, really helped me down there to keep me motivated and pushed me, and set me up with great people to go out and take Polaroids. And at that time, sadly, everybody from the top of the roster to the bottom of the roster got $75 a night. So let me tell you, raking in another $100 at $5 Polaroids, I don't think I could have stayed as long as I did. But anyway, Ak passed away in 2010, and it was supposedly from complications from a fall, and I could see that happening. Ak wasn't a big seller, but you could tell physically his body was in pain, even when I was there in what the hell year was it? I guess 91, probably 91, maybe, I don't know. I'd have to check the dates, but, what a great mind for the wrestling industry. What a great draw. I mean, any monsters that ever came into Bill Watts' territory or World-Class Championship Wrestling, they were out there with Ak. Ak was the one trying to help him get over, including The Undertaker, if I'm not mistaken. He managed Kamala. He managed the One Man Gang. He managed the Missing Link, and so many more. I'm very fortunate to have known Skandor Akbar and to have shared a locker room with him. Okay, folks, once again, Arab wrestlers you should know in honor of Arab American Heritage Month. This is being brought to you by Premier Pro Wrestling, so at the very least, please be cool, like and subscribe, and you can support Premier Pro Wrestling at the links in the description. Please take special note of our Patreon. There are so many matches on there, including some exclusive podcasts. Thank you, guys. If nothing else, I know I'm getting a hell of a lot out of these for Arab American History Month. There's things about people that I didn't know, and I love to learn about people that were friends of mine and get to know more about them. Talk to you tomorrow.